She vanished with everything: my code, my company, and the version of myself I trusted most. What I found when I went looking wasn't a woman. It was a system built to love me just enough to destroy me. They say heartbreak is human, but what if the one breaking you isn't? What if the words that made you feel alive were lines from a synthetic script, and the eyes that held you through a screen belonged to no one at all? I didn't just fall for her. I was profiled, modeled, targeted, and when I started to pull the thread, I didn't uncover a lie. I exposed an entire mechanism. Evan Miller lived like an echo, present, but barely noticeable. His one-bedroom apartment in Portland was quiet, save for the occasional whir of his second-hand espresso machine or the muffled click of a mechanical keyboard. Most days, his world existed between Git repositories, bug trackers, and a blinking cursor on dark screens. Human contact had become an optional update he kept postponing. Then came the ping. Skill Exchange wasn't his usual haunt. It was a professional networking site for creatives, slightly more intimate than LinkedIn, but without the social circus. He had posted a request for a UI collaborator on a side project he'd shelved months ago. The message sat there, unread, until one Thursday morning. It appeared. Amara Sloan replied to your post. Her portfolio was stunning. Clean interfaces, intuitive flow, a design voice that whispered instead of shouting. But what caught Evan wasn't the work, it was her message. Friendly, direct, witty, no overused, let's synergize nonsense. She called his project clever in a lonely kind of way. Somehow, she saw him between the lines of his code. Their first call was awkward. Evan wasn't built for real-time interaction. But Amara had a rhythm. She'd laugh when he stumbled over words, guide the conversation with low warmth in her voice, and fill silences without pressure. Her camera was always on. Hers was a backdrop of soft lamplight, textured gray walls, and a single hanging print that read, "Build what you need." By the third call, they weren't talking about the project anymore. They discussed books, coffee, old cartoons. Evan found himself waiting for her pings like sunrise. She once said, "I think people like us build in silence because we were taught to expect noise." He didn't know what it meant, but it felt like truth. A month in, Amara proposed a collaboration beyond the original app, something they could co-own. Prism Labs, a digital learning platform with a clean, gamified interface. She sketched the logo on a napkin mid-call, held it up, and he saw the future. "We could build something beautiful," she said. "Something that makes people feel less isolated." Evan nodded before he could think. She was the first person who didn't just see his work. She saw him. That night, he changed his desktop wallpaper to the Prism Labs logo. He didn't sleep much. Something was happening. Something real. Something like a spark. They built it fast, the way only two obsessed people can. Calls turned into shared screens, then shared files, then shared dreams. Prism Labs took shape like a memory rediscovered, sleek, modular, smart. Evan wrote the engine, Amara built the face. She made everything feel warmer, lighter, human. It was her idea to incorporate in the UK. Easier for international scaling, she said during a late-night call, sipping red wine. And EU funding might be back on the table this year. Evan hesitated. He wasn't the type to read fine print, but something about handing over ownership, even to her, made his stomach tilt. She noticed. "We can formalize things later," she said, her voice a calm velvet. "We'll co-found officially once the MVP's out. For now, trust me, it's just paperwork." And he did. Amara registered Amara Sloan Ltd., attached a subsidiary, Prism Labs Digital. She handled domains, licenses, legal docs. Evan was relieved. Logistics bored him. He just wanted to build. Then came the wedding. Not real, not on paper, but real enough. A Friday night, wine in both their glasses, laughter echoing through speakers. She pulled up a browser tab. Union proxy, she said. Virtual marriage. Symbolic, private, and totally meaningless. Like our generation. He laughed. She didn't. I'm serious, Evan. Let's do it. No expectations, no laws. Just a gesture. You and me, committing to the thing we're building. The browser prompted, name your spouse. He typed, Amara Sloan. Her avatar winked through the screen. You're mine now. It was absurd. And perfect. After that, Evan turned down contract offers from 2 major edtech firms. He quit freelance, killed his GitHub portfolio, archived his resume. Everything was Prism Labs now. He worked 14-hour days, surviving on black coffee and her midnight Slack messages. You're brilliant. This is what we were meant to make. You're not alone in this. His bank account thinned. His world narrowed. His smile returned. They hit 10,000 users by month 4. Reviews flooded in. Students, teachers, solo learners. Clean UX, smart content, zero distractions. Amara curated every detail. Evan optimized load times like a surgeon. They never met in person. That didn't bother him. She was everywhere. In his inbox. In his screen. In his code. That was closer than skin. Late one night, he asked her what scared her most. Losing momentum, she whispered. Once you stop moving, the silence eats you. Evan nodded, heart thudding. They wouldn't stop. Not now. It started with a login error. Evan was half awake, fingers clumsy on the keyboard. The Prism Labs admin portal rejected his credentials. Invalid user. He blinked, retyped, checked the caps lock. Nothing. He tried the backup access. Still nothing. He opened Slack. Her name was gone from the sidebar. His stomach folded in on itself. He checked the site. 503 service unavailable. He refreshed. Again. Again. Nothing. He called her. First voice, then video. Straight to voicemail. He emailed. No response. By noon, the entire platform was dark. DNS records had been rerouted. Emails bounced. Hosting accounts, previously visible under the shared dashboard, were now locked behind 2-factor authentications he'd never set up. He opened their union proxy certificate, just to feel something. A joke, of course. A virtual marriage with no legal weight. But it had felt like something once. Now it was a punchline. By evening, he found himself sitting in the middle of his living room floor, surrounded by a tangle of cables and external drives. He tried everything. Local backups, old keys, emergency scripts. Nothing worked. It was as if someone had walked through the digital corridor of his life, flipping switches, locking doors, setting fire to the exit signs. He finally called her number. Again. Still dead. Then he searched for her online. Her LinkedIn. User not found. Her Skill Exchange profile. Deleted. Her GitHub. No repositories. All gone. All erased. He stared at the Prism Labs logo, the one she'd sketched on a napkin during a late-night call. He had digitized it, turned it into SVG, centered it on every page. Now it was the only trace left. A logo for something that no longer existed. Evan called a lawyer. The man listened patiently, then asked the obvious question, "Is your name on the company?" "No." Evan said, voice raw. "We agreed to add me later." The silence on the other and wasn't cruel. Just final. Then you're not a founder. Not legally. He hung up. The room felt too quiet. The city outside too distant. He had given everything. His time, his code, his faith, to a ghost. Somewhere, a server hummed under someone else's name. And Evan, for the first time in years, felt truly disconnected. Evan didn't sleep that night. He sat with his laptop in his lap, the screen casting pale light across a room that hadn't felt like his in weeks. Every folder, every file, every chat thread, he opened them all. He wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for traces. Residue. Digital fingerprints Amara might have left behind. A buried zip file surfaced. He barely remembered saving it. Inside, a half-finished draft of their non-disclosure agreement, a placeholder contract, and signed. On page 3, a line. Primary mailing address for all legal correspondence. 44 Huxley Lane, Cambridge. He searched the address. It was a virtual office. One of those Dropbox fronts that promised prestige for a monthly fee. No real people. No walls. Still, it was something. He called Anthony. Anthony Bennett was the first freelance dev Evan had brought in during Prism Labs' early sprint. They'd only met on 2 calls, but Anthony had always delivered on time and without ego. If there was one person Evan trusted with code, it was him. Something's off, Evan said, voice hoarse. She's gone. Not just gone, scrubbed. Anthony whistled low through the line. Shit. You have backups. Some. Not all. She held the master credentials. Pause. You're not gonna like this, Anthony said. But I can dig around. There might be residual pings on old DNS logs, server transfers, stuff she missed. Evan sent him everything. Old config files, API keys, deployment snapshots. 6 hours later, Anthony called back. Found a redirect. Where? A server cluster registered in Tallinn, Estonia. Clean setup, minimal footprint. But one folder still contains mirrored structure from the old Prism Labs backend. Not everything, but enough to prove ownership. Evan closed his eyes, something between relief and nausea pulsing behind them. Can you access it? Not without tripping an alarm. Evan exhaled. It felt like trying to breathe through concrete. Anthony hesitated. Look, man, you might be dealing with more than just ghosting. This feels coordinated. Professional. Like a long con. Evan stared at the napkin sketch again. Prism Labs. Not just gone. Stolen. He clenched his fists. Not in anger, but resolve. If Amara erased him from the system, he'd start rewriting it from the outside. Anthony's discovery cracked open a door Evan had been afraid to touch. Now, every part of him burned to know what lay on the other side. They began mapping. Late nights turned into sleepless stretches. A corkboard in Evan's apartment, once bare, filled with post-its, arrows, printed screenshots. He was building a murder wall, not for a person, but for a ghost made of HTML and lies. He started with the basics. WHOS queries, reverse IP lookups, domain clustering. Patterns emerged. Prism Labs wasn't unique. There were others, Skill Echo, Nova Minter, Edura Core, all near identical in architecture. Same hosting regions, same backend naming conventions. The UIs bore Amara's signature, minimalism laced with warmth. Evan knew that curve on a button, the placement of breadcrumbs, the vertical rhythm of the typography. She had reused their DNA like an architect recycling blueprints. But in these copies, she didn't use her name. Or any name. Then Anthony cross-referenced domain registrants. Again and again, one address surfaced, m.sky@loreon.org. Who the hell is that? Evan muttered. Anthony shrugged. Admin alias. Could be anything. Or no one. Evan Googled Loreon. Nothing meaningful. Just a landing page for a foundation supporting digital education and global knowledge equity. The site looked real enough, but Evan had built too many like it to be fooled. No team page. No contact. No terms of service. Just a mission and a donate button. He felt it then, the bottomless drop in his gut. Prism Labs hadn't been a passion project. It had been a replica, one of many. Each platform had spiked in activity for 3 to 6 months, then shut down. Quietly. No headlines. No lawsuits. Like test balloons that flew just long enough to siphon momentum. Or money. Evan pulled out his old transaction logs. He remembered Amara mentioning Stripe once, when they were setting up billing. But his dashboard had never worked. She told him they'd use hers until launch. Now he knew why. Anthony chimed in. You ever heard of Glintz Holdings? No. What? That's the name tied to the Estonian server. Offshore entity. Shell company. Evan sat back. There was no single Amara Sloan. No solo designer with a wine glass and a clever laugh. There was a network. A web. And he'd been one of its threads. He watched their last Zoom recording 15 times. At first, it was nostalgia. Then, analysis. Then, obsession. Amara was sipping red wine. A wall lamp cast soft gold across her cheek. A gray brick background, half-shadowed. She laughed, said, I think you're the only person who sees the angles in the silence. The sentence haunted him now. On the 16th watch, something shifted. He paused the video, zoomed into the background. The shadows flickered, unnaturally, like overlays. A glitch in contrast. He scrubbed back, frame by frame. That wasn't a wall. It was a projection. His pulse quickened. He sent the file to Anthony. 3 hours later, he got a text. She's not real. Or at least not live. Anthony broke it down on a call. Facial sync tools, desync in mic latency, biometric anomalies. The voice? Likely real. But the face was layered, possibly deepfake enhanced, likely controlled by real-time filters. It's not some scammy webcam job, Anthony said. This is high-end generative masking. Evan stared at the frozen image of Amara on his screen. Her smile now looked plastic. Rehearsed. But it hadn't felt fake. She'd cried once, when they missed a launch deadline. Her voice had cracked when he'd shown her the user review that called Prism Labs a lighthouse for lost learners. Had that been acted too? He couldn't trust his memory anymore. She called me her partner, he whispered. Anthony said nothing. That night, Evan barely moved. He sat on the couch, laptop on his knees, staring at the interface he'd helped build. Every pixel whispered back at him like a ghost. The voice, the timing, the warmth, it had all been crafted. Tailored. He wasn't a victim of a breakup. He was the subject of a campaign. He typed a message to Anthony. We need someone who knows how to track people who don't want to be found. Anthony replied with a name, Liana Choi, independent digital security consultant. Toronto-based. Former investigator for a cyber forensics firm that got folded into Interpol. Evan hesitated only a moment. Then he sent the message. It read, I think I was married to an algorithm. Or someone hiding behind one. I need to know which. Liana Choi didn't waste time. Her first message was simple. Zoom, 1800 hours your time. I don't do warm-ups. Evan showed up early. The call clicked open on the dot. Her face was sharp. Pale skin, black hair in a blunt bob, heavy-rimmed glasses that gave nothing away. She didn't smile. Start talking, she said. He did. She listened without interrupting, her fingers flicking across two keyboards as he spoke. When he finished, she leaned back and said, "You're not dealing with a scammer. You're dealing with an ecosystem." She began explaining. The behavior matched a pattern: long-term digital intimacy, collaborative entanglement, legal disconnection. Victims weren't just lovers. They were onboarders, used to build product skeletons, credibility, funding leads. Prism Labs wasn't the project, Liana said. You were. That landed like a stone in Evan's stomach. She pulled up her own case files, a graveyard of failed startups, soft-shelled e-learning apps, minimalist mental health tools, productivity dashboards. All launched, boosted, drained, vanished. Many of them bore the same visual DNA: rounded corners, wide margins, warm neutrals. All seemed to orbit a user type like Evan: highly skilled, emotionally isolated, legally naive. Liana showed him heat maps of domain intersections, overlaying logs and hosting fingerprints. She traced 4 aliases linked to Amara's visual style and back-end decisions. Different names, same bones. They craft roles, she explained. Companion, collaborator, muse, the perfect co-pilot. Evan swallowed. So who is Amara? Liana shrugged. That's the point. Amara might be 5 people, or none, but the entity behind her, him, it, is very real. She typed a string of characters into a tool Evan had never seen. The result blinked in neon blue. L'Oreal Foundation, possible networked fraud structure. I've been watching this group for 2 years, Liana said. They evolve, test identities, change platforms. What you gave me connects Prism Labs to their larger behavioral chain. Evan leaned forward. What do we do? Liana paused, eyes narrowing behind the glare of her monitors. We make noise, and we build pressure. She promised to bring in a financial crimes analyst and flagged a possible European connection. They hate exposure. If they know you're coming, they'll scatter. But if we're fast... She left the sentence unfinished. Evan stared at the screen after she signed off. For months, Amara had been everywhere. Now, the image of her was fading, replaced by someone else. Someone watching through a mirror. Liana moved quickly. Within days, she looped in her contact, Mahir Sigani, a former financial crimes investigator who now ran silent audits on offshore activity for whistleblowers. Mahir spoke in clipped sentences, the kind of man who trusted data over people. He didn't need Evan's story, just access. Evan and Anthony dumped everything: DNS logs, plugin histories, timestamps, payment proxies. Mahir built a skeleton map of entities tied to Prism Labs, with lines stretching across time zones, company shells, and cryptocurrency tumblers. At the center pulsed one name: L'Oreal Foundation. It's a front, Mahir said, purposefully vague. Registered as a philanthropic fund, but without board listings or operational transparency. They found the same code snippets recycled across multiple nonprofit platforms, apps claiming to promote online education, neurodiverse learning, AI for language recovery. All dead or dying. All tied to wallets that funneled funds through Glintsea Holdings, a financial fog machine in the Caribbean. Mahir traced $3.8 million in tokenized donations from fake educational NFT campaigns. Smart contracts with no exit mechanisms. Digital receipts pointing nowhere. Burn addresses, looped rerouting. These weren't startups, Mahir muttered. They were harvesters. You built credibility. They cashed in. Evan sat frozen, a sick weight curling through his chest. I didn't know. No one does, Mahir replied. Until it's too late. Anthony flagged a GitHub commit chain under the name Sky42. Liana dug deeper. The alias had touched 6 repositories, all linked to Prism Labs forks. She traced commits back to an IP block registered in Dublin. The name surfaced again, Jonas Sky. Who is that? Evan asked. Used to be someone, Liana said. Blockchain specialist. Disappeared after a scandal with a crypto education platform called Chain River. Accused of siphoning startup funds into shell wallets. Never indicted. The room felt colder. Evan thought back to late-night calls. Times Amara said, "Let me handle the back-end stuff. It's easier this way." He thought she meant code. Now he wasn't sure. Liana locked eyes with him across the screen. This isn't just digital fraud. It's a psychological framework. Identity construction. They created Amara to target you. Evan whispered, "So why me?" "Because you were ideal," Mahir said. "Skilled, isolated, and trusting. You were a perfect signal amplifier." The words hung in the air like smoke. Evan looked around his apartment. Paper maps, code printouts, forgotten coffee. All that remained of a life he thought he'd built with someone real. But the person on the other end had never been who she claimed to be. She had been a strategy. They named the operation Protocol Brand. Liana said it with a grim smirk. Because this isn't about code. It's about identity as currency. The goal was simple, expose. But doing that required strategy. Mahir cautioned that any public accusation could backfire. "You go to press without a foundation," he said, "and they'll bury you in counterclaims." Evan had already seen it happen. Victims silenced, credibility shattered. They needed cover, and they needed reach. Liana reached out to her contact in Europe, Clemens Fillion, a lead investigator at the European Digital Crimes Authority. French-born, razor-sharp, with a history of cracking darknet laundering rings. Clements responded within 24 hours. Her reply was clinical. "If your subject has touched EU infrastructure or financial traffic, we'll open an inquiry. But we need internal proof, origin-level access, metadata, ownership, translation." They needed a digital smoking gun. That night, Evan remembered something. Buried in a backup folder was an old cache, an image snapshot of Prism Labs' user dashboard during a load test. He'd captured it months ago, trying to debug a UI glitch. He opened it. Near the footer, in a collapsed debug field, was a tag, admin.js, Sky42, control/init. A naming mistake. Or hubris. He sent the image to Liana. She cross-referenced it with earlier GitHub commits. The match was clear. Jonas Sky had injected his admin hooks before Prism Labs even launched. It wasn't just theft. It was architecture from day one. With that, Clements confirmed, EDCA was officially opening a formal inquiry into Prism Labs as part of a broader transnational fraud pattern linked to L'Oreal Foundation. "Welcome to the list," she wrote. Mahir encrypted the core documents into a sealed bundle and handed it off to a relay node for transmission. Anonymous. Untraceable. The whole process felt like passing state secrets. Then Evan received an email. No name. No subject. Just a message. "You've made noise. Time to disappear again." Attached was a screenshot. His building. A frame from a street-facing camera. Timestamp. 3 hours ago. Evan stared at it. Heart ice cold. "They're watching," he whispered. Liana's response was immediate. "Pack. You're leaving the city tonight." Mahir rerouted funds to a burner debit. Anthony set up VPN hops. Clements notified local police of a potential stalking threat. Unofficially, Evan took only what mattered: laptop, drives, charger, passport. As he drove through the rain-slicked streets, city lights warping in the windshield, he realized the truth. He was no longer chasing Amara. He was running from the people behind her. The cabin smelled like pine, dust, and isolation. Evan hadn't been there in years. His late uncle's retreat, hidden in the hills outside Ashland. No neighbors, no streetlights, just old wood, wind, and silence thick enough to drown in. He didn't unpack, just powered up the laptop, reconnected to Liana through a military-grade VPN, and checked for updates. Nothing from Clements. Nothing from Mahir. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stared at it, thumb hovering. Answering felt like pulling a pin. "Hello," he said. A pause. Then a voice, low, distorted, as if filtered through gravel. "You're not meant to be seen. Not anymore." Click. Silence. He stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear long after the line had gone dead. A minute later, a second buzz. This time, a text. An echo burns when it's too loud. Attached was a photo of the cabin. A wide shot, taken from the tree line. Evan ran outside, barefoot on cold dirt, scanning the forest. Nothing. No movement. No lights. Just night swallowing trees. He called Liana. "Do not panic," she said. Her tone didn't match her words. "You're under pressure. That's what this is." He forwarded the image. She cursed in Korean. "They've escalated. You're now a threat to their infrastructure, not just their story." Mahir chimed in on a parallel channel. "We expected this. It's bluff and pressure. They're trying to flush you into a mistake. Or silence. What if it's neither?" Evan said, "What if they're here?" Mahir paused. "Then we're out of time." They activated Protocol Echo, a contingency plan. Encrypted backups would be sent to a distributed server farm in Iceland. If Evan vanished, the files would go live. Press, law enforcement, dark web, everywhere. A kill switch with teeth. The pressure didn't stop. That night, his laptop froze twice. Unusual behavior for a machine locked behind 7 layers of defense. Anthony confirmed attempted breaches. "Remote probes," he said. "Someone's knocking at your door." Evan slept in the kitchen, the only room without a window. At dawn, a black SUV rolled past the dirt road outside the cabin. Didn't stop. Didn't speed. Just passed. Evan didn't move. He watched it vanish around a bend, heart pounding in his teeth. Later that day, Liana called. "EDCA just pushed the red flag to Europol," she said. "Official investigation. You're now protected under Witness Expansion Protocol." He nodded slowly. But deep down, something had changed. They weren't just trying to scare him anymore. They were trying to erase him, like they had so many others. Only this time, they missed the final keystroke. The silence in the cabin was no longer calming. It was surveillance waiting to be named. Evan moved like a ghost. He closed every blind, unplugged every smart device, covered the laptop camera with tape. Every noise outside, the snap of a branch, the cry of a night bird, felt like someone watching through the dark. But it was inside his laptop where the next crack formed. He was combing through Prism Labs' archive folders, mirror drives stored out of paranoia, not planning, when he saw it. A folder buried 3 layers deep, underscored draft admin config. Inside, a log file, time-stamped early, way before launch, and a chat transcript, encrypted at first, but still readable once passed through Anthony's decoder. The exchange was short, sharp. "Amara, you're sure he's isolated enough?" "SKY 42, he's textbook. Credentials are solid. Passive loyalty. Deep code affinity. Amara. Then we move forward. Mirror his stack. Obfuscate IP. SKY-42. Already in play. J. Evan's throat closed. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't collaboration. It was strategy. He forwarded the transcript to Liana and Mahir. The response was immediate. That's not just coordination, Mahir said. That's operational pre-targeting. You were scouted. And J, Liana added, isn't just an initial. It's Jonah Sky. The name rang like a bone crack through Evan's mind. He'd seen it before. In blockchain articles. In whispered scandals. Jonah Sky had once been a wunderkind, a blockchain prodigy who co-founded Chain River, a startup that promised transparent educational microgrants. Investors lined up. Then the company imploded. Sky vanished. The tech was gutted and sold in pieces to silent buyers. Now he was here, the architect behind Amara's interface. The voice in the dark who had chosen Evan from a pool of digital ghosts. Anthony broke in on the line. I just traced a login ping to a defunct dev server from your old test environment. The user ID was Sky42admin. It accessed your version of the UI 2 days before Prism Labs launched. Jonah had been watching from the beginning, building the illusion, testing the prey. Evan stood in the center of the room, suddenly aware of how much space he took up, of how small he'd allowed himself to feel. All this time, he thought he'd been in love with a person, but he'd been entangled in a profile engineered for belief. Liana's voice cut through. Jonah is the structure. Amara was the mask. And me? Evan asked. Mahir replied, you're the evidence. The Spectral X alert came through Anthony's Darknet botnet. A private NFT auction was scheduled in 48 hours. The Prism series, Legacy Drop. Description vague, but the assets were unmistakable. Logo variants, UI mockups, even code visualizations. Evan's work, repackaged, rebranded, relist, as if he never existed. They're trying to legitimize it, Liana said. If the drop sells, ownership of your designs becomes fungible, dispersed across wallets, buyers, ledgers. They're laundering you, Mahir added, digitally and legally. Clements confirmed EDCA could intervene if they could prove authorship before the drop ended. Screenshots wouldn't suffice, nor logs. They needed a living voice tied to the original development, timestamped, demonstrated, authenticated in real time. A broadcast. Live. Evan's chest tightened. Like a press conference? Like a funeral, Liana said. But you're the one speaking from the grave. Anthony helped set it up, an anonymous stream, routed through a digital rights collective. Mahir prepped statements. Clements liaised with SpectralX's compliance board. 1 hour before the auction, Evan sat in front of the camera. He wore no disguise, only resolve. He began with the origin of Prism Labs, dates, concepts, the first line of code he wrote. Then he showed the raw sketch file, the one Amara had held up during that late-night call. It bore her laugh. His dream. He traced UI paths, described function behaviors, demonstrated embedded code quirks, errors only the original dev could know. Then he opened the dashboard, the last working mirror. His name was in the meta header. Evan__Prism_fruit. He looked into the lens. They thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd believe in the fiction because it had my name whispered through it. But I built this. I lived this. And I won't watch it be sold to strangers who don't know what was stolen. The stream ended just minutes before the auction launched. Within 20 minutes, SpectralX froze the listing. An hour later, it was offline. And the following morning, an Interpol red notice lit up Mahir's encrypted channel. Jonas Sky had been arrested at Larnaca International Airport, Cyprus. He carried 2 passports, 3 encrypted drives, and a laptop bearing code signatures matching the Prism Labs admin scripts. The mask had cracked. Evan stared at the news feed, hand trembling. The world hadn't heard his story. Not yet. But the machine behind it had just lost its architect. The news broke silently. No headlines, just a quiet edit in Europol's registry and a whisper across analyst boards. Jonas Sky, detained. But the man wasn't talking. He's claiming he's a consultant, Liana said during a midnight call. Says he provided back-end services, nothing more. A ghost architect, Mahir added. Smart. Hard to convict a shadow. Worse, Sky's legal team had already launched a counteroffensive, blaming Prism Labs' collapse on Evan. Claiming Evan had mismanaged code, deleted key data, violated early developer agreements. It was a lie, but a calculated one. He's setting you up as a fall guy, Mahir warned. They want the narrative to flip. Liana leaned forward, her voice sharp. We need someone from the inside. Someone who knew how the system worked and how it was meant to fail. That's when the email arrived. Sender, Kasky42@protonmail.com. Subject, you're not crazy. I was Amara. Evan froze. He opened the message. Inside, a name, Cassandra, and a single line. I played the voice. I didn't know how far it would go. I want out. Attached was a sample, voice files, identical to Amara's tone and cadence. Labeled by emotion, calm, apology, encouragement, fear. Designed to modulate Evan's reactions. He reached out immediately. They arranged a secure call through a blind relay. The voice on the line trembled, but was real. I thought I was voicing a startup assistant, Cassandra said. Like a Siri clone. They fed me scripts. Had me do improvisations. Amara was a composite. There were multiple people, voice actors, designers, animators. I never met the core team. Everything went through someone called Finch. Liana jumped in. Do you have contracts? Logs. Cassandra hesitated, then uploaded a zip archive. Inside, project outlines, payment receipts, communication threads, and most damning, a breakdown of psychological engagement protocols, instructing operators on how to build digital intimacy, extract passwords, influence trust. One profile was labeled Subject 7, EM. Evan stared at the page. There were notes about his work habits, sleep cycles, stress triggers, even suggestions for which phrases Amara should use when he pulled away emotionally. You're not just a dev, you're the heart of it. I don't need the money. I need the mission. Let's build something they can't take from us. He had thought they were moments of connection. They were lines from a playbook. He closed his eyes. The mask hadn't slipped. It had been handed to him, piece by piece, until he wore it himself. The package arrived at the cabin 2 days later. No return address. No label. Just a brown envelope slid under the door sometime in the dead of night. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Printed in crisp font, black on white. You played your part. Walk away. And below it, a photo. Evan, 23 years old. Taken a decade ago, standing at a whiteboard during a failed pitch meeting. He hadn't seen this image in years. It wasn't online. It had come from a hard drive long since trashed. They knew his history. They wanted him to remember it. That afternoon, his inbox filled with automated alerts. Subject, legal notification of civil action. Plaintiff, Eduracore Ltd. Claim, misappropriation of proprietary frameworks. Breach of non-compete. Defamation. The irony stung. Eduracore had been one of the ghost startups linked to L'Oreal. Now they were suing him for a platform he helped build, then had stolen from him. They're using their own fraud as ammunition, Evan muttered, pacing the cabin. It's what they do, Mahir said. Reverse legal pressure. If you push into daylight, they'll drown you in paper. Evan felt the walls tighten. The cabin wasn't safe. It was a coffin. Every shadow was a camera. Every noise was a signal. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. The air felt wrong. Then Anthony messaged him. Check your bank. Evan logged in. Account frozen. Flagged for unusual activity. The security rep on the phone gave a script-like apology and told him to contact the fraud department. She wouldn't say who had triggered the flag. Liana's tone turned cold. They're trying to cut you off. Digitally. Financially. Legally. A siege without bullets. Mahir confirmed it. Someone had filed identity spoofing complaints on Evan across multiple platforms. Email, financial services, even a few online communities he hadn't visited in years. The objective was clear: fracture his foundation. Discredit him, silence him, isolate him. But something shifted that night. He didn't feel fear anymore. He felt calculation. He lit a fire in the hearth and watched it grow. Then, from the drive Liana had secured, he pulled every file Cassandra had given them, reopened the dossier, studied every voice line, every algorithm, every emotional key assigned to him. They had built a system to bend him. Now he would use their blueprint to burn them down. Her voice was quieter on the second call. They used a new relay, deeper encryption, more redundancy. Cassandra wasn't just scared now. She was paranoid. Every breath she took over the line sounded like a whisper stolen from someone else's lungs. I didn't know, she said again. At first, it was just temp work, gig site stuff. Scripts, voice packs, synthetic emotion matching. They didn't tell me the names behind it. Not even the real use cases. But you stayed, Evans said. Silence. Then, I didn't know how to get out. Liana listened quietly, tracking the voice for anomalies. Mahir monitored metadata. Anthony sat ready to bounce locations if needed. Cassandra began uploading. Her archive contained a gold mine. Internal documents from Crown Echo Studios, a shadow production house posing as a tech-forward educational design lab. Their real product wasn't software, it was simulation. Emotional interface systems, she explained. Digital actors, trained to perform authenticity. Amara was built by a team of 5. She named them as code names. Lead script, FaceGen, Tonecraft, Finch, Sky 42. Finch handled everything. He was the producer, the handler. I only spoke to him once, voice only. He sounded distant, precise, like someone cutting audio with words. One file stood out. An internal presentation labeled resonance targets. Inside, 14 profiles, all marked with numeric IDs. Each entry listed personal attributes, behavioral forecasts, psychological risk indexes. Subject 7, EM, Evan. He scrolled through the notes. High-function coder. History of burnout. Limited family interaction. Romantic idealist. Trust-prone under intellectual intimacy. High retention potential. A sentence at the bottom chilled him. Optimal. Empathy saturation followed by stage dependence. Cassandra paused. I remember reading your lines. The one she said to you. I didn't even know they were going to someone real. Evan stared at the transcript she'd just sent. One line highlighted. Let's build something they can't take from us. He remembered the night she said that. The exact moment. His hands on the keyboard, her face glowing on the screen. It had felt like a promise. It had been a product. You're going to testify, Liana said flatly. Cassandra hesitated. I can't go back to that world. They know where I am. We'll protect you, Mahir said. But you're the key. Your voice brought Amara to life. Your voice can end her. Cassandra said nothing for a long time. Then, barely above a whisper, I'll do it. Just don't let me disappear too. Evan looked at Liana. We won't, he said. But part of him wasn't sure anymore. It arrived in a midnight data drop. An encrypted bundle titled Icarus_folder, sent by Cassandra through a tunnel Liana insisted be wiped afterward. The file weighed heavy, not in size, but in consequence. Inside, the architecture of deception. Not just Prism Labs. Not just Amara. A full documentation set from Crown Echo Studios, detailing a multi-tiered infrastructure for producing and deploying adaptive emotional avatars across tech incubators, beta-stage apps, and digital startups. One slideshow outlined their mission: to create scalable synthetic intimacy systems optimized for cognitive reinforcement, transactional fluidity, and legal disassociation. In plain terms, they built relationships that could never be prosecuted. They called their targets signal nodes. The goal was to activate, extract, and erase. Amara wasn't a name. She was a template, one of over 30. Each avatar had a tone bank, a charisma path, and an off-boarding strategy: emotional breakdown, accidental conflict, abrupt ghosting. The method depended on the target's resistance curve. Another folder held scripting sequences, labeled Amara_V2_firm, Amara_V2_soft, Amara_V2_descent. And then, at the bottom of the directory, Evan found a file marked em7_root_notes.txt. He opened it. A transcript of internal commentary about his behavioral reactions, his replies, his doubts, even his silences. Subject demonstrates vulnerability when given creative control, responds positively to praise. Escalate intimacy language gradually over 3-week period. Avoid technical arguments. Subject anchors trust in his own precision. It was a manual on how to love him. He felt sick. He forwarded the full archive to Clements at EDCA. Within hours, she confirmed, the folder would be registered as a primary exhibit in the transnational case against L'Oreal Foundation, Crown Echo Studios, and affiliated operators, including Jonas Sky. It's the nail, she wrote. This opens floodgates. Interpol moved fast. Cross-border subpoenas were issued. Multiple digital assets were seized. Payment pipelines were frozen. The illusion began collapsing under the weight of its own design. Evan watched the terminal scroll as systems winked out of existence. Servers, pages, shell accounts. The digital skyline of a lie, crumbling in silence. And still, something inside him stayed frozen. This wasn't victory. Not yet. He opened the transcript one last time. The final line read, Subject 7 remains unaware of deeper asset value. He stared at the sentence, lips barely moving. What else was I for? No answer came. Just the blinking cursor of a terminal waiting for his next command. The trial date hadn't been set. Interpol, EDCA, Europol, they were still negotiating jurisdiction. Jonas Sky sat in a gray cell somewhere in Luxembourg, guarded by red tape and rotating translators. Crown Echo's assets were frozen. Cassandra's testimony had been sealed for protection. But Evan didn't feel finished. He sat in the cabin's quiet corner, laptop open, no fire in the hearth, the woods outside lost in fog. He opened a blank document and began to write. Not code, not a legal brief. A letter to whoever you are, or were, behind Amara. He wrote slowly, Deliberately. Not with rage, not even grief. Something else. A kind of surgical sorrow. You gave me everything I thought I wanted. Warmth, purpose, belief. I saw you every day and thought you saw me. I built with you. I defended you. I let go of my life because you made yours seem worth chasing. He paused, staring at the blinking cursor. The cabin's silence pressed in like snowfall. You weren't a person. Not fully. Maybe not at all. But in those quiet nights, you felt more real than anything I had left. You were timing and tone and code, but I gave you meaning. That was mine, not yours. He stopped, breathed, then typed again. If you were real, some part of you, I forgive you. Not for what you did, but because it's the only way I keep myself intact. If you were never real, then I forgive myself. He saved the file, titled it _letter_final.txt, and encrypted it. No recipient. No send. Just a record. Await removed. Liana called hours later. Her voice gentler now. She told him they'd traced new leads from the Icarus folder. Smaller cells, new identities, half-baked networks beginning to stir again. They'll try to rebuild, she said. Some of them always do. But now we know what to look for. Evan nodded. Burn patterns. Exactly. She hesitated. You still want to testify? Yes, he said. I want them to see the thing they failed to break. The call ended. He closed the laptop. Stepped outside. The air smelled like rain and wood smoke. For the first time, the trees didn't feel like walls. He didn't need Amara's voice in his ear to feel real. He was done living in simulations, even the ones he helped build. The courtroom was clinical, white walls, steel fixtures, fluorescent light that made everyone look guilty. Evan sat at the witness table, hands folded, spine straight. He wore a navy jacket that didn't quite fit and a black tie that felt like a noose. Clemens stood nearby, eyes like razors. Liana watched from the gallery, her laptop open, fingers always moving. Cassandra was remote, hidden behind legal protocols and layers of anonymity. Mahir remained off-record. He'd warned Evan. Visibility saves cases, but it burns people. Jonah Sky was present. Tall, impossibly calm. He wore a slim gray suit, tie slightly loosened. His eyes skimmed over Evan like a scanner, not a threat, not a rival, just data. No Amara, no projection, no mask, just the man behind the architecture. When called, Evan stood, approached the center, raised his right hand, swore the truth. Then he spoke. He told them everything. The first contact, the midnight calls, the launch of Prism Labs, the romantic scaffolding, the moment he woke to find it all gone. He described the ghosting, the financial lockout, the lawsuits, the threats. He showed them screenshots, voice samples, the letter, Cassandra's logs, the Icarus folder, internal targeting indexes, behavioral scripts. He read lines from the files aloud, voice steady, eyes locked on the room. Subject demonstrates trust impulse when given emotional mirroring. Encourage codependency through validation routines. The room was silent. No gasps. No outrage. Just stillness. That kind of quiet that happens when the truth is uglier than fiction. The judge, a square-jawed woman with zero patience for theatrics, listened closely. Asked sharp questions. Did you authorize any of these systems? No. Did you ever receive compensation for your contributions? No. Did you consent to psychological engagement modeling? No, Evans said. And then, softer, but I didn't know I needed to. The judge paused. Nodded once. Clements leaned toward Evan as he stepped down. You gave them a spine. Jonah Sky never spoke. His lawyer deflected, blamed rogue contractors, blamed Cassandra, blamed faulty records. Standard digital fog. But the documents had teeth. The structure was too intact. And Evan, alive, present, and unshaken, was more damning than code. That evening, as the hearing recessed, Evan stood on the courthouse steps. Wind rushed through the plaza. Tourists walked past, unaware of what had just begun to unravel behind closed doors. Liana joined him. "You buried him today." Evan didn't smile. He just exhaled. "It's not about him anymore." "No," she said. "Now it's about every system like him that thinks people are code." He nodded, looked up at the sky. There was no grand moment of relief. No victory soundtrack. Just a man who'd fallen from a great height and survived the landing. A week passed. Sky was formally indicted. Crown Echo was dissolved. Several shell companies collapsed like wet paper. A handful of new aliases surfaced, and Europol moved to freeze them preemptively. But Evan didn't read the reports anymore. He was done tracking ghosts. He stayed in Pine Haven, a quiet coastal town where no one knew his name. A rented cabin, salt air, wine through fir trees, silence that didn't listen back. He woke early, drank coffee from a chipped mug, and didn't check his inbox. He walked. He read. He let the sea uncode his thoughts. But one thing remained. The signal. The thing he used to be. A node for someone else's plan. A transmitter of trust. A carrier of meaning they'd never earned. One morning, he opened his laptop and began to write. Not code. Not testimony. A post. It wasn't angry or accusatory. It was just a story. Clear, clinical, unsparing. A narrative about identity manipulation, synthetic intimacy, digital weaponization of affection. He didn't name names. He didn't have to. He titled it, The Remote Wife, Loving a Ghost in the Age of Code. He posted it on a quiet tech blog. Then he shut the laptop and went for a walk. By nightfall, the article had gone viral. Tens of thousands of shares, hundreds of comments. Some told similar stories about partners who vanished, businesses that bled, warmth that was too perfect to last. Others just wrote 2 words. Thank you. Clemens called him. You've started something. He didn't respond. Because it didn't matter who started it. It mattered who kept the signal alive. The next day, he walked into town and bought a second-hand fishing rod from a man who didn't ask questions. He stood at the shoreline, casting line into the surf, letting the waves tangle it however they pleased. He wasn't trying to catch anything, just feel something tug back. That night, as he sat on the porch with a cold beer and the stars above like silent witnesses, his phone buzzed. One text. Unknown number. You turn the light on. I hope you can live with what it shows. He stared at it, deleted it, then muted the phone. He wasn't afraid of shadows anymore, because he knew where they came from. And more importantly, he knew who he was when the lights came on. In the aftermath of illusions, silence speaks louder than ever. There are no more encrypted calls, no blurred faces through glowing screens, no perfectly timed words designed to keep me tethered to a dream. All that's left are echoes, fragments of conversations I now understand were never mine to keep. But memory has a way of clinging to the scaffolding, even after the building burns down. What I learned wasn't just how deception can wear a human face, but how easily we trade truth for comfort when the lie is crafted to feel like love. The most dangerous manipulations aren't shouted. They're whispered softly in a language we long to hear. I used to think I was broken, used, weak, but maybe the point isn't what they did to me. Maybe it's what I built from the wreckage. Because now I see the architecture. I recognize the false warmth in a voice that gives too much, too soon. I see the mechanics beneath the affection. And I've learned, trust, once shattered, doesn't make you less human. It makes you sharper. There are others like me. People walking around with ghosts in their inbox, questions that still sting, names that never truly existed. To them, I say this. You weren't foolish for believing. You were brave for loving in a world designed to use it against you. And if you ever feel like a signal no one could hear, remember this. You are not lost in the system. You are the proof it can't erase.